is up, Paradigm? How are we this evening? It is so good to see you guys. My name is Jonathan Clark. I'm the young adult pastor here at Abundant Life. I'm really excited for the message tonight. As I was preparing, I'm starting to realize I'm adding more personal stories, so I'm exposing some of myself to you guys. I'm pretty new here, so you guys can get to know me a little bit better tonight than you otherwise would have. The message tonight is going to be in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, if you want to turn there. It is going to be on it's like smack dab in the middle of your Bible, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. If you don't know where that is in relation to other books, the Psalms is a pretty big book. If you're doing one of those just kind of fanning through the pages, you'll hit Psalms, and then right after that is Proverbs. That's where we're going to be tonight. So let's just get into it. I don't even know if I should be sharing this story. So if you get to know me a little bit, you'll realize that I'm pretty particular, and I like things to be clean, orderly, and under control and taken care of. And I like it to be clean and organized, and I don't do well with messes. And so you can imagine having kids would make that difficult. And I have two little kids under the age of 4, and so when I'm at home and I'm realizing my son has taken his snack all over my pillow and smeared it all over my pillow, or for whatever reason I found some of his potty training gone wrong in the corner, I'm starting to grow these muscles of oh my goodness, what am I gonna do? It's like when you go and reach for the refrigerator door and it's just smeared with peanut butter. Like peanut butter fingers everywhere, the peanut butter fingers all over the windows. And so I'm growing in that, but all of that started, I didn't realize that about myself until 4 years ago when we had our first daughter, about 4 years ago. Our first daughter, Eden. Sydney and I were in the hospital, and so she was a week and a half late. And so for the nurses in the room, that's like getting into danger zone, but not quite yet, but we're pretty close. Meaning if the baby stays in there longer, we got issues for both the mom and the baby. And so we're waiting. I mean, I'm anticipating our family to grow. We're thumbing wondering, okay, when is this going to happen? And so we go to the hospital. The doctor's like, yeah, we got to go now. And so they put her on Pitocin, which is just a drug to get her ready to go into labor. I don't know the experience of going into labor, but I am told that it is painful. On top of that, I'm told that it's more painful. I don't know for certain, but I know I've been told it's more painful if you get induced to go into labor. And so she was being induced. So we went in at 8 p.m., which is not a great start because I'm already near bedtime in my control method of going to bed at 9. And so by that time, we make it all the way till 3 a.m. And by 3 a.m., her contractions are so intense, she's like, I can't, in order for this baby to come out, I'm gonna need some help. And so she's like, John, will you please call for the epidural person? And so I'm like, yeah, I'll call him. So I call, and it's 45 minutes later that he comes rolling in. And we're waiting, and I'm like, where have you been, bro? The epidural guy comes rolling in as if he's not in a hurry, and I'm just giving him the look like what is going on? Where have you been? And so he rolls in with his little cart and his little deal, and he doesn't seem like he's been late. He seems like he showed up on time. And so he's acting like he showed up on time, which to me is like, bro, I have no hope in you at this point. And so he walks in with his cart, and he's getting all of his stuff prepared. He's putting together his shot. And if you've ever seen the epidural shot, it's like a sword. And so he brings that thing out, and I'm like, well, where is that going? And he's explaining it all to me. I'm signing away the paperwork. I'm like, this is unbelievable. I'm not even hearing what he's talking. And then all of a sudden, he says something in passing that I caught. And he said this. He said, oh, and there is a slight risk that your wife is paralyzed from the neck down. And I said, well, that's kind of a big deal. What am I signing here? I've pretty much signed all of the papers that are here. And I just signed away what? And he said, don't worry. It typically doesn't happen. I'm like, what do you mean typically? And he says, no, you don't have to worry about it. I just need you to come to the front of the bed. So my wife is sitting off the side of the bed with her legs on the side, and she's sitting up. And so the doctor puts the child in back there, but she sits forward facing me. And he asked me to sit on one of those rolly doctor chairs that I'm talking about. And so you sit on one of those rolly doctor chairs. He says, sit there and hold your wife's legs together as strong as you can and make her as still as possible. And by the time I have to put the shot into her back to get the epidural going, it's very technical language here tonight. To get the epidural going, you will need to be so still. And the second I go in, you guys both need to relax. The second I'm about to put the epidural shot in, you need to just completely relax, both of you. But until then, hold her as still as possible so I'm ready to go. And so I do it. I'm like, let's go. So I'm holding her and I'm sitting there and I'm like kind of shaking myself. I'm like, am I having contractions? Like, what's going on? I'm sitting there holding her legs. And meanwhile, I'm like doubting this guy already because he was so late. And I'm like, I don't love the environment in which you're being late on me. That doesn't tell me that you're pretty organized. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And he goes the first round and he misses. And I'm like, you have got to be out of your mind. Bro, I waited 45 minutes so that you could come here and miss. I'm like, I could have gotten a doctorate in that amount of time. And meanwhile, you're here missing the first shot. And I'm like, well, what's going on here? Do you need my help? And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, this can't be. And so he's like, you guys have to trust me. You guys have to believe that I know what I'm doing back here. Trust me. You have to relax. And so I'm going to count down from 3. And you just have to, at that point, when I say 1, you have to completely let go. Don't hold on to don't hold your wife's legs anymore. Just completely let go. Dad, this is your responsibility to show your wife that you're completely relaxed. You take the lead. You trust on 3. And so I'm like, yeah, you're right. And so he goes again, and he's like 3, 2, 1, and I'm just still like, I can't even hear him. I'm still like so tight on my wife's legs, and he missed again. This time I'm like, okay, maybe we just go do it from home. I'm not one of those guys, but like maybe we should just go do this at home. I don't know what the deal is. And so the third time, he's like, guys, you have to just let go and trust me. I had no hope and confidence in this guy. He's missed twice. I'm like, at this point, let's just go get some tacos and figure out if this baby is gonna come out different. I don't know. We're gonna figure out a different plan. But the last round, I'm like, okay, if I want my family to grow, then I have to trust that this guy knows what he's doing, even though I really don't feel like I know what he's doing. And so I'm sitting there and I'm holding on for like dear life. And she's having like some serious contractions now. And we're like waiting for him to finish. He's getting ready. He goes 3, 2, and I passed out. I have no idea what happened from there on out. I swear I just passed out. I'm like, I don't know. I couldn't do it. You brought me to the border. I couldn't get to 1. I passed out. And I'm on one of those rolly chairs, right? And so I got no support underneath me. And so I'm rolling back. The nurse catches me. She's supposed to be helping Sydney. And I'm rolling back. I fall back into the nurse's arms. When I wake up, Sydney's already got the epidural. I'm like, do I have an epidural? And all the nurses, 5 nurses around me, helping me out, getting me back to life. And Sydney's already got her epidural in her. I got to the border of trust, and I said, nope, I'm not going. And I passed out. It was so embarrassing. And I'm looking into you guys' eyes now, and I just know some of you are going to walk up to me like, you passed out? Like, yeah, I did pass out. That's just me. I couldn't do it. I couldn't let go of control. I couldn't let go. I had to hold on. And I'd nurse that apple juice. You know, some of the little cup apple juice that you get in the hospital? It's just so good. I don't know what it is. But why do I share that story with you tonight? Because so many of us live our lives like that. We live the 3, 2, 1, and we get to the border of our trust and the border of what we're supposed to walk in faith towards, and we can't. And we back up and we reassess and we question the doctor, or maybe we're just sitting there and we have such a hard time trusting because we're looking at the needles or we're feeling the contractions of life. And we spend so much time thinking about, oh my goodness, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to, where am I supposed to, this guy was late, what am I supposed to do? And we spend so much time with burden with this idea that we can't grow in our trust because we're too busy trying to figure it out. And so that's what we're gonna be talking about tonight. Are you coming in here tonight and thinking about, man, maybe this past weekend was the first weekend that you walked in to a Mother's Day without your mom? Or maybe this is one of the first weekends that or maybe this is the first season that you've been in where you've been hanging over the abyss of singleness. Or you've been struggling with a relationship that you just don't know is the right thing and God's calling you out, but you really don't want to give it up. Look, preaching a metaphor on trust is easy. But looking your wife in the eyes as she's in so much pain, wondering if that doctor had the best intentions in mind and the best skill set to do what he was called to do is really hard. So maybe you're here tonight and you feel like, man, I'm stuck in my faith and I don't know what it is. I don't really feel God's presence moving in my life anymore. I'm telling you this tonight. This passage is for you. This passage is to bring us past the border of that like superficial faith. We're in a series on maturity, and we're all talking about all this growing that's happening, but we haven't talked about truth yet, or trust. And trust is the thing that we have to grab hold of if we want to continue to grow and move forward. So if you guys would jump into the text, I've titled this sermon here tonight, Trust Issues, because we got trust issues, yo. We got some trust issues. We're going to be in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. I'll start it here in verse 5. It says this. It says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. So this verse is probably familiar to many of you, most of you probably. If you've been and grew up in the Christian church, this is probably familiar to you. This is a very familiar passage. But we have to set up why we're reading this passage first and who has written this passage. The author of Proverbs is a guy by the name of Solomon. He's the son of King David. Solomon then became king after his father David. And Solomon was the wisest man to have ever lived. And what wisdom means is honestly just this. It's just understanding how things are connected. So why did Solomon write a book for us? I did a ton of research for this, and you need like a couple degrees in order to get this answer, but honestly, no, it's just in chapter 1, verse 2. It says, Proverbs is written to know wisdom and instruction. Chapter 1, verses 2, I'm just hopping over to show you why Solomon wrote the Proverbs. To know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Why Solomon wrote the book of Proverbs is to teach us that growing in wisdom leads to maturity. That last part, the knowledge and discretion to the youth, he's literally teaching us wisdom so that we would grow up. And so we're reading a book tonight, and the text that we're reading tonight is all centered around this idea of Solomon saying, hey, I was the wisest man to have ever lived, and here's the notes that I've taken for you. Read it. But so many of us read the Proverbs, and we're thinking to ourselves, okay, well, this is just a bunch of self-help stuff. And we kind of culturalize the book as that. And so we get tattoos with Proverbs on it and just be like, oh, I got a tattoo with Proverbs on it, or it's very familiar. But it's not a self-help book. It's a lens through which we are called to follow the Lord with. And so it's a lens through which we put on in order to understand how to see things being connected as they are. This is growing in wisdom. Solomon didn't just write this so we just had some like coffee cup sayings. He wrote this so we could understand wisdom. Not only that, did he write that to train our thinking, to train the way we see and the way we think. That's why it's written. And so we've heard before the saying, you gotta live and learn. But this text is all about, in the book of Proverbs, is all about learning to live. It's all about learning to live. So that's what we're gonna be saying tonight. That's the premise of the background of where we're gonna be tonight. But let's jump into the text that we're studying tonight. It's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. It says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart. I've already read it once, but we're gonna get really familiar with it tonight. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all of your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. So where are we headed? There's three steps we're going to take tonight. It's all about how do we grow in maturity? How do we grow in our trust? Step number 1 is trust the Lord with all of your heart. Step number 2 is do not lean on your own understanding. And step 3 is acknowledging him in all of our ways. That's how we're breaking the text down tonight. So let's start with the first section. The first section is trust the Lord with all of your hearts. But the first word is like a non-starter for us. Until we understand this first word, everything else kind of seems to fall apart. And so to define trust is to set one's hope and confidence upon someone or something. So I did a little bit of research on this because trust is something that we're so familiar with, but what does it really mean? How do we really understand trust? And how does that engage with something that's just very understandable? How do we engage with trust in our mind and not just theoretical, but very practical? What is trust? And so I was researching, and I found this study done by this guy named Erik Erikson, and he published this study called The Psychosocial Stages of Development. I have a picture up here for you guys. It represents 8 different stages of our psychosocial development. The psychosocial development picture is coming soon, but in the meantime, so this is all about how our brains are wired to grow. And so when we are growing, our brains are wired to grow psychosocially, which means it's just how we think about things outside of ourselves. And so the first stage in our psychosocial development is this element of trust. When we first come out of the womb, the first thing we're learning is how to trust. Can I trust that the mother who birthed me is going to feed me? Can I trust that when I cry, someone's going to come to my need? Can I trust these things? And so that's the first thing we're learning when we come out of the womb is, can I trust? The beautiful thing about this is that this is not a mistake to God. First things were first when God was designing us. In the same way that our psychosocial stages are developing is the same way that God designed us spiritually. He could have chosen any other one of those steps to be the first step, but he chose trust. First things first. When we come out, the first task he gave us was here. First task you have, and you don't even realize it, because you're just sitting there crying and wetting your diaper is, you gotta trust. It's unbelievable that God designs us this way. I love when the Bible relates to like real life and the real world and the way things were designed. Isn't that amazing? It's so cool. But God designed trust not only to be this beautiful thing, but as culture does with many good things that God designs, it's corrupted. And trust in our culture is hemorrhaging. I read this article this past week from Forbes. It goes like this. It says, Gen Z levels of trust are dropping across every segment of life, from police to courts to military, news, media, Hollywood, and of course the government. From last May to June, there was a 20% decrease in the share of Gen Z that trusts people in power to do the right thing. Oh boy. With trust in institutions in decline and optimism about the future falling, they are frustrated. And listen to this. Yet they strongly believe that they can be agents of change. Did you hear that? Read between the lines. That article and many others, because I followed up with a ton of other research, many other articles are saying the same thing. It's saying we have so little trust with what's out here, and yet we believe we can be the agents of change, which means what? That means we don't trust anything out here, but we trust all in here. And this shift from our ability to see what's out here as being not trusting, we've not only become lack of trusting out here, but we've taken that trust and we put it on ourselves and we made it control. And so why am I reading an article from Forbes in church? Some of you guys are like, I thought we read the Bible here. Like, what's going on? I'm reading an article from Forbes magazine. Because until we address our horizontal vernacular, or until we address our horizontal lens, the way that we see the world, we won't start to apply the way that God sees it. And so until we realize that we have a lens on our eyes when we're reading Scripture, so often we're approaching Scripture and we're reading right into it. But God says, no, take out what I am reading into it and what I want you to get out of it. Don't read your horizontal understanding of trust into my text. I want you to understand what I mean when I say trust, not what you mean. And we've gotten that flipped, and we started to trust ourselves. And that is ultimately what stands for control. That is control. When we trust ourselves, that is control. That's the jump that we make. Everything holds in the balance of this idea of trust. If we don't understand what trust means, then we will never understand how to engage with the rest of this verse. I'm apologizing on the fact that I've spent so much time on this one word, but it's so important. If you guys don't understand that the trust that you view is not trust, but it's control. And so often we sit in our lives and we think everything's good when we think we're good at trust when everything's going well, but when something goes wrong, what do we think? We think this is not going well, right? And so when we're sitting there, and we even coined the saying, and we say this, we say, don't worry, everything's under control. We're good, don't worry. And so we've even found peace in our ability to find control. Is that making sense? We found peace in our ability to find control, but we haven't found peace in our ability to trust. And so let's run a diagnostic. It's really difficult to find our trust issues if we can't find where we have control issues. So I'm just going to ask a couple questions. Do you round down at a restaurant when it's time to calculate the tip? These are control diagnostics. Do you have control in your heart? Do you think about your money constantly? Are you constantly working overtime to control your perception? Do you trade honesty for peace so everyone will like you? Are you always assessing your friends to see if they're worth being your friends, or see if they're really Christian or not, or see if they're really worth your time, or are you assessing your friends? But let me flip the script on this a little bit. Do you find community in control? Because if you find community in control, you can read this Bible verse all you want, but you're going to read trust and you're going to read control into trust. But so many of us are used to finding community in control. We text our friends when we have a problem to try and help them find answers for us. And we text our friends, and we are the friend that is constantly trying to interject our opinion into the other person's lives. And so we're constantly trying to control each other's lives together. Even the Pharisees and Sadducees did this in the New Testament. They spent none of their time together on things that mattered. But the one thing that they came into agreement on was the fact that they both believed and they both found community in the fact that they needed to put Jesus to death, because they loved the idea that they could control Jesus, just like we love finding friends that we can start to control our lives with. And so if that's you tonight, we're just assessing, we're just running diagnostics on our life. Is this me? Is this who I've become? Are these the friends that I've cultivated around me that just help me get through my problems, or help me try to sneak around the truth so I can be successful and do what I want to do anyway, and not speak down upon the things that I know are wrong, but they just speak life into me anyways? If we're being honest, and if I'm being honest, I'm guilty of that. I find friends that allow me to have control. And they know my place in the pie, and I know my piece, and I know that they're going to speak life into me no matter what I do. But sometimes we need friends that will call and say, hey, I don't know what to do, but I'm going to encourage you to trust the Lord with all of your heart. I'm going to challenge us tonight, man. Are those your friends? So why am I spending all this time on the first word? I literally won't spend this much time on any of the other words tonight, but I had to spend this much time on this first word because it's been the same problem since Adam and Eve, all the way in the back in the book of Genesis. Satan's temptation is the same all the way through. He tempts us to trust in the things out here, and when those things fail us, we bite into that apple of control. We're tempted to trust in all that sits out here, and all the fancy things, all the money, all the relationships, all of our family, all of our worth, all of our clothing, all of our influence. We're tempted to trust in all of that, and when some of it fails or gives the illusion of failing, what do? Our reflex is to sit back and say, oh, no, forget it. I'm just going to control this. I'm not going to date again. I'm not going to give one more dollar. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to keep it all to myself and control. That was a long teaching segment to get to this point. Don't leave tonight thinking that you can get by growing when your fists are only growing more clenched. Don't leave tonight thinking that you can grow out of something when in reality you're just getting tighter grip around it. Don't leave. Point number one is this. How do I grow in trust? Step one is go all in. You have to. You have to go all in. The rest of that verse is so important. It says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart. The challenging thing about seeing Satan's first temptation as being trust in everything out here is to think that we've missed, nothing is trustworthy, and the only thing trustworthy is ourselves. But the amazing thing about this text is it says trust, but it doesn't say just in anything. It says in the Lord and with all of your heart. Biblical trust is unique in that it calls us to do trust exclusively and absolute. It has to be exclusive and it has to be absolute. We get so tempted into thinking that our trust doesn't have to be exclusive, which is why we run around trusting in a million other things but God. And all the while, we think that we can get away without it being absolute. Sure, God, you can have my trust, but you just can't have all of it. And so we spend all of our lives chasing around, and we become older, and we can become less able to do what God's calling us to do because we just push down this idea that God wants us more for our lives because we just desire trust more than anything else, and we're so tempted by it. But how do we trust in the Lord with all of our heart? This is such a hard thing. It's so hard. And especially when we're making it really personal about the things that really matter in our life right now, like the pain that we're feeling, or the relationship that fell through, or the sin that we committed and now we're dealing with consequences of that. How do we trust the Lord through all of that? This is really hard, but in the same sentence, Solomon continues and says, and do not lean on your own understanding. How? How do I love the Lord or trust the Lord with all of my heart? That's the answer. It says not leaning on our own understanding. Culture says the opposite. It says, what is culture always selling? Culture is always selling this idea that you know best. You do you. You live your truth. That's how it works. You know what's best. You know where you're going. You know what's best for you. Don't lean on anything but yourself. And so we treat our trust like this table, or we treat the worthy of our understanding on this table. And our understanding is just something that we lean on. And if this table fell through and my understanding became less available to myself or less clear, then what would happen? I'd fall over, right? And so many of us are doing this in this room. I do this. We lean on our trust, and we put all of our weight in this idea of trusting in our own understanding. The very things that keeps us from trusting is one thing. It's our understanding. It's nothing else. It's our understanding. We glorify in our ability to apply logic. We glorify in our ability to have reasons. This is why we're so good at rationalizing things. It's like you go out and buy a red Ferrari and say, guys, and your friends say, well, dude, how did you afford that? You're like, well, I mean, like, one, it was a really good deal. And two, it was like, I had to buy it now or else the price was going up. And three, my grandmother's aunt's favorite color was red. And so I feel like it all makes sense. And so we just rationalize, and we just love our ability to do that because we just make these ideas up of like, oh my goodness, I have a really good idea. I have a really good idea. And we just rationalize. And we start to lean in on our understanding and seeing things the way that they are, when in reality, we don't see it all. But not using our understanding seems reckless. This is the part of the message where I'm like, I'm calling you to do something, but it's really difficult. Because leaning on your own understanding seems like the opposite of that is just throwing your head out the window. Doesn't that feel like that? I read this and I'm like, well, not lean on my understanding. Well, what am I supposed to do? Just throw my head out the window and just like follow? What does that mean? Is this a cult? What's going on here? That's not what God's saying. God's not saying, and Solomon's not saying through this verse here, that you just need to chuck your head out the window. It doesn't say that at all. It says, the Bible doesn't say don't seek out understanding. It says don't lean on it. Don't think that it's the only thing that exists. Don't think that it's the only thing that you can prop your source of truth upon. It's not true. Do not lean on your own understanding. It doesn't say do not seek your understanding. It says do not lean on it. Do not put all of your weight on you thinking that you get it and you understand it. We do not. Solomon is trying to plead with us and tell us we don't understand like we ought to. And that's why he's writing this, is because we think that we understand. And so I brought a song here tonight that I wanted to share with you guys tonight. It's a really, really, really good song. So I'm going to have the team play it back there for us. The song is so good because it's just good. And you guys can hear it right now, right? It's pretty good. This is what it's like to lean on your own understanding. To think all that there is to this song is just percussion. And you thinking to yourself, I think I could do this. Like, I really think I could do this. If I could just shake a cymbal. And so this is it. This is leaning on your own understanding, thinking percussion is all there is. But I told you it was a really good song, just like the Bible tells us that we have a really good song ahead of us. And then we start to realize, man, maybe there's more. And so all the while, we can only hear percussion. We can only hear our relationship that's falling apart. We can only see the thing that's not working out. We can only look at our bank account and see the problem with our finances, when in reality, God has a whole symphony playing. And all you got to do is just stand up and get to see that your understanding isn't worth trusting. God has so much more in store for your life. And as long as you sit there and think that percussion is all there is, you're just going to flip to the next song. And you're going to run around and try to find different ways to figure out how to add more instruments. That's not the plan that God has for you. God's plan for you is this. Because he's a way maker. He's a miracle worker. And I don't know what you walked in here tonight with, but man, maybe you've been trying to have a baby for a while and you just been have a hard time. And that percussion is just playing over and over. and you can't understand. The song just isn't that good yet. Wait. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. When we lean on our own understanding, we make decisions that assume percussion is all there is and all there ever will be. That is not true, because this book, the Bible, says so. We learned this from two people in particular. Jesus didn't lean on his own understanding. Contrary to popular belief, Jesus, 10% of all the things that Jesus said in the New Testament was his quotation of Scripture, meaning of all the times that they captured Jesus actually talking, which was not like all the time, 10% of that was literally him just repeating Scripture. Why? Because the Son of God knew that he couldn't even lean on his own understanding. Solomon, our author, knew this probably better than anyone that's ever lived, because when Solomon first became king, what did he pray for? He didn't pray for anything else. He didn't pray for wealth. He didn't pray for riches. He didn't pray for anything else. What did he pray for? He prayed for understanding and discernment. And God gave it to him. And so the man that wrote this isn't telling us because he thinks we should just try it out. He's saying it's tried and true. Bet your life on it. Because I've seen it with my own eyes. I love that. But how do I grow in trust? Step 2, surrender your understanding. Stop believing that you know that the story's written. It's not over. Stop believing that it's over. It's not. Stop believing that percussion is all there is. It's not. It is not all that there is. So how do I trust in the Lord with all my heart? Not leaning on my own understanding. And how do I not lean on my own understanding? I love this. This is like basics. It's like just step, answer, step, answer. How do I not lean on my own understanding? It's this. In all of your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. This verse is literally saying, in all your ways, make him known. Bring him in. Let him see. Bring him into the decisions that you're making. I don't know how often you do that, but when you're sitting in your car, how many times are you bringing him in? So many of you know that I'm pretty new to the area. As of 5 months or so ago, many of you know this about me. If you don't, well, I'm pretty new. And the process to getting down here was like not easy. And so we prayed so much over our move, my wife and our 2 kids moving down from Chicago here to Kansas City. And the process of that was like really challenging a lot of different ways. As you can imagine, we're like picking up, uprooting our families. Both of our families are in Chicago. But there's like 3 things that made moving here like really, really hard. And the first one is finances. I didn't come from like another ministry job. I came from a corporate setting in Chicago. And so this is like, it's just a new adjustment for me. And so all the while I'm like, okay, I had a great financial future planned out for our family, and it was like looking great. And I was like, this is fantastic. God's so good to us. And then we start to make the decision to like curb and come here because we felt like God was really calling us to come. And that process, like, I just hate for you to think that, like, I'm standing up here and I have it figured out. Like, I don't. And I'm, like, trying to figure it out. But this process, like, really showed me, like, man, maybe I do need to put this verse on. And this verse, like, rode with me all the way through the process of trying to, like, oh, wait, is this where you're calling us, God? And are we supposed to go here? And is this really where you want us to be? And so we prayed so much over our finances and like, God, I don't know. This doesn't seem loving. Like, I don't know. Like, I have no idea. Like, you want us to sell our house that we just bought? I thought this was a house that we were going to live in forever. And here we are selling it less than a year later. This doesn't make any sense. And so I'm like, and my understanding was like, this is the dumbest decision I've ever made. And then I've had friends tell me, this is the dumbest decision financially you have ever made. And it is. And I've had friends tell me, and I don't mean that in theory, but like it is, financially, it really is dumb. It made no sense. The decision that we made to come here and give up all that we had to come down here and do this, it's so amazing to see how God has provided in the midst of that. But in the process of that crucible of having to make a decision, we had to learn on trust on our finances, but it wasn't just trusting our finances, it was trusting in God to steer us towards away from family that we thought was really good. And our understanding was like, God, I thought you said family was good. And we're not coming from a family like, we're pretty blessed because I know that there's family situations in here where like, I would love to move out of the country if it meant leaving my family. But that's not the family that we left from. We love both of our families. We're just like such great relationships with the cousins and all of that. And so to turn and tell them, hey, we feel like God's calling us to go and move. and just see their tears start to roll down their eyes, it felt like I was like being inhumane. And it felt like I was like crushing like our poor parents' souls when I was taking their grandkids. It didn't matter about us. It was the grandkids for sure. And I just felt like it just felt so wrong. And then the third thing for me personally that like made it really difficult to trust the Lord. In every one of these steps, I'm thinking, this doesn't make sense. But you say to trust in the Lord with all of your heart. You say to trust in you with all of your heart, to not lean on my own understanding, and to all my ways acknowledge you, and you're going to make my path straight. And so I'm thinking, and trust in the Lord with all my heart, and do not lean on my own understanding. And the last one that I had like a really hard time with was to look at my family and think, I'm going to pick you guys up. I'm going to take you away from all of our support and all of our friends that we were leaving that felt like was really good community. I'm taking you guys away, and I'm going to plant you somewhere else. And somehow that's going to work out. And so my little kids, of course, they have no idea what we're doing, and I'm like literally picking up our family and we're driving away. And I'm not a crier at all, but I remember like holding the steering wheel, and I just remember like a tear like literally flowing down my cheek. It was because of that. It's because, God, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. And I'm looking at my kids, and they have no idea. They're just like I don't know, sucking their finger or like sticking their food in places that it probably shouldn't be, in the car no less, which is a whole nother story. But the idea that I had to put on this verse and wear it when I didn't feel like it was really hard. And I don't share any of that to say, oh my goodness, look at me, I figured it out. I brought these pile of rocks here, which if you guys know us or if you spend our time at our house at all, even since being here, we have these rocks. And these rocks to us represent God's straight paths that he's made since we've moved here. And so all along the process of praying and acknowledging him in our ways, we've just prayed over and over. I just have no idea what we're doing. And the nights that I laid staring at the ceiling, God, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. This seems stupid. This seems stupid. This seems stupid. God started to make our path so straight. And he used people to do it. He used things that we would have never guessed to do it. He used people like in this room to do that. And so we would just like etch on these rocks, and we leave them on our dining room table not because I figured out trust, but because I'm so bad at it. I'm like in training on it. I suck at trust. And so I have these rocks to remind me. I remember all of the ways that he's made my path straight, which reminds me to acknowledge him in all the ways I have yet to experience. And when I'm acknowledging him, I love this. It goes in reverse. When I acknowledge him in all of my ways, what does that force me to do? It forces me not to lean on my own understanding. And when I'm not leaning on my own understanding, I have the opportunity to trust him with all of my heart and nothing less. Isn't that amazing? You can read the verse forwards and backwards. That's just kind of cool. It's amazing that God allowed a man to write a story and write a verse like this, where he's just teaching something so simple. It's learning how to trust. So how do I grow in trust? Step number 3, bring him in. Bring him in. This series, I have loved this series because it's all about growing in our maturity. It's all about going from one place and going to the next. That's why we have a dandelion back here, because it's going from one sort of dandelion to the other sort of dandelion. And by the end of your dandelion days, you multiply. It's so beautiful. But the idea of this maturity thing is to grow in Christ's likeness. And so how does Christ represent trust? The very last thing that Jesus Christ said on the cross was a statement of trust. He said, Father, into your hand I commit my spirit. That's a statement of trust, nothing less. He's hanging up on that cross, and he says, Father, into your hand I commit my spirit. Now, that's a familiar phrase to him because that passage is ripped from Psalm 31, verse 5. And it's a psalm that many of the Jewish children were praying with their fathers right before bed at night. Right before they fell asleep, they'd say, Father, into your hand I commit my spirit. And so Jesus hung from that cross, and he prayed words of trust. And he prayed to his heavenly Father and said, God, I don't know. I thought this is what you called me to do. I don't know where you're calling me next. I don't know if this is what I was supposed to do. I think it is because you brought me here, but I don't know. And I don't know what comes from next. But he hung on that cross and he said, Father, into your hand I commit my spirit. But that wasn't an easy thing for him to do. He hung on that cross with nails driven into his feet. And in order for him to even say that phrase, he had to push up with everything that he had and say, Father, in your hands. Because to even proclaim that out so that someone on the ground, just think practically for a second, someone on the ground had to hear him say that so that we would have a gospel written, hearing how Jesus trusted in the Lord with all of his heart. And he didn't lean on his own understanding. He took all of his ways and acknowledged him. This is why he's bringing his word across all of the New Testament. And every single time Jesus was referencing his Father's voice in the Old Testament. And then he hung on that cross and he said, God, here's my spirit. And he pushed up. Why? Because trust takes everything. It might feel like you don't have the breath in your lungs to trust anymore. And the pregnancy that you wish was working out, or the relationship that you thought was going to work out, or the sin that you thought you were going to get past and you don't. Jesus just hung on that cross and said, God, into your hand I commit my spirit, because he trusted that God knew better than he did. And that the solution that God had was a better solution that Jesus could even conjure up. Jesus knew how to pray like a child. So if you're here tonight and you're sitting on the border of the thing that I could go through the whole Rolodex. I could read your mail. But I'm just not going to go there tonight. If you're sitting here tonight and you're on the edge of trust, meaning I know I got to grow at this, and I know I need change in my life, and I know I need to grow, but you're seeing the epidural shot guy, and you got little faith in him, and you're feeling the contractions of what life really feels like when the bank account is low and you're not sure how you're going to make the next payment. If you're at that place tonight, I'm just going to ask you to stand to your feet, because trust takes everything. And just like Jesus pushed off of his feet, I'm going to ask you to stand to yours, because this is a point that you may never get to step into again, where God called you into a room this night, and he did not do that by mistake, to get you to a place that makes you know, just trust me. He's taking you by the shoulders and he's saying, trust me with this. Trust me with this. Trust me with this. So if you would, stand to your feet. If that's you tonight, and God, I just need to trust you. I'm going to pray over you tonight, but if that's you tonight, just stand to your feet. God, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do with this relationship. I don't know what I'm going to do with this problem. I don't know how I'm going to manage this situation. You're not. God is. I'm going to pray. Dear Father, I'm just so thankful for this evening, God. But let not a soul walk out this door misunderstanding what you meant by trust. Teach us to be people that trust you with all of our hearts, that do not lean on our own understanding. In all of our ways, let us acknowledge you, God, so that we can look back at our life and think, man, you made my path straight. You made my path straight. Amen.